I wasn't aware what was about to happen. My parents had been overseas at this time too. So the only time I'd see them was occasionally a weekend here and there, and I guess very chirpy phone calls with, "Life is great, everything's fantastic," from me, where essentially maybe it might not have been, but that is what I believed. So I was put into a hospital in Toowoomba. 16, 17-year-old girl, didn't know what an eating disorder was, other than this was me. This is how I managed my life and I guess kept my order. I was always a girl of structure, so I just didn't really know what was going on. I was placed into a hospital ward where everything was taken away from me. And I mean everything. I was given a hospital gown, and a doctor came in to see me and said, "You will not be getting back anything until you start eating." And this was just, I guess, it was really strange because I hadn't really thought about why I'd stopped eating. It was just something that I did, and I guess it was different chemicals. So you get to this point where the eating disorder takes over and you're running with this feeling. So your hormones and chemicals in your body are working at a different level to those that are not. I guess it's much like if we take the situation of somebody's using drugs. They've got different chemicals going through their head there. They're operating with this energy. And this is exactly what happens with an eating disorder. So I was in there and this doctor had said, "You're not getting anything back until you eat." And I just went in my head, well, we're going to have a long time here, because with an eating disorder, it's not about just being able to eat, because then, wow, wouldn't we all be living our best lives? So we were there for a while, and this was very old school treatment. So what I'd like to say is thank you to the system. This doesn't happen anymore. This was the epitome of, I guess we didn't know what eating disorders were back in the day. And we thought that maybe if we use this method that we'd be able to treat and I guess get something to eat. Not the case. We've come a long way. So my parents came in and realized that this wasn't working, and I believe must have got myself to a bit of a position, and I was able to go back home to Brisbane and I guess start treatment up there. So as soon as I got out, obviously the eating disorder kicks in and we went back to old ways. I went into a hospital in Brisbane and I had met a doctor who I did continue to see for 8 years, essentially saved my life, this guy, for years to come. And he spoke to me. So the thing with eating disorders is you're very switched on, you know what's happening, and you're quite together. This is why we go into the complexity of it. It's just that you don't eat. And obviously that's seen as there is something wrong if you don't want to eat. So I remember my doctor, before he admitted me into hospital, he goes, "You realize that this is, I guess, going into a program." He goes, "You realize that this is an acute, I guess, mental hospital where we put you in for eating disorders and you have to learn to eat." And basically he was, talking to me on my level to go, this is, I guess, what we're seen as eating disorders, and I guess trying to address the complexity of seeing somebody that is functional but doesn't want to eat, and here we go with this protocol for the program. So I was put into this place, again, as I said, had no education about eating disorders. I knew nothing. And I had my first admission on an eating disorder ward. So I said 16, 17 years old, and put in with, there were only other girls at the time on this ward, and we were put into a program. So we all had to sit on a table and eat together, which was bizarre to me. I remember talking to my mum going, "Why would you put me into a hospital to learn how to eat if I don't eat?" And I remember sitting there, and strong, determined woman, if I wasn't going to eat, or girl at that age, if I wasn't going to eat, I wasn't going to eat. It wasn't about having a choice. And I remember sitting there and it just wasn't working for me. There were incentives of if you didn't finish your meal, you had to have meal replacements. And basically you were in there until you gained enough of a healthy BMI weight to be able to, I guess, go home. And it wasn't about that. I definitely had my guards up. I wasn't going to go in there to eat and I guess gain this. I felt great with the eating disorder. I knew what I was doing. So it wasn't really working for me. And this is where different methods start to come in. Eventually, they will get your nutrition into you in some way. So we started the rounds of tube feeding, and eventually that became life for me. I used to live, I guess, a lot of my life with a tube, nasogastric, running through me to feed me. And this was such a war because you would feel such defeat with the eating disorder. It was, you were being manually fed and you could feel this nutrition coming into you and you were fighting it. It was just something that you didn't want to do because you felt good. So basically, from the age of 17 to 25, my life was hospital. That's what I knew. Don't get me wrong. I had life in between. I had periods where I would attempt uni. I got to live on campus. I got to be a flight attendant for a bit, which was always my dream. But the eating disorder would come in and most of I knew was the revolving door of hospital. And during this time, it was the eating disorder got worse and worse. It was those initial, I guess, thrills, those chemical spikes of what the eating disorder was providing me, started to really not work. And I cannot explain enough or even go into depth on a YouTube video or film of what that felt like. So that was my first hospital admission and things got worse. The eating disorder was at its flare. I thought I'd destroyed my life. I'd never finished year 12 and this was it. I was in and out all the time. I ended up having over 25 hospital admissions in my time. And this would range from medical, I spent time in ICU. Eventually my eating disorder got worse from that age of 17. I am sitting here today and I'm very lucky. I almost lost my life to an eating disorder with only having, I guess, less than a day to live. I saw periods where my family was ready to say goodbye to me. I'd been set up. I'd had doctor's approval of saying that she wasn't going to pass and she wasn't going to make it. Life was hospital and this is what I knew. And I guess that was a big period. And for those who are in hospital, who are in treatment, I guess we know what that's like. And this is where I can empathize to say there is a light at the other end. I guess through those years of my early 20s, it was a very strange time. So as starvation kicked in, the depression did, OCD took over to the extreme, anxiety, and I was not living an okay life. I was completely in my head. I'd started a lot of medications that doctors had put me on, and I'd lost so much of my cognition. So this was something that I had always had. I prided myself on my creative thoughts. I prided myself on achieving through school, and I just declined, absolutely mentally declined. I was a shell of a person. So I guess, not even guess, at this stage, this is what severe enduring anorexia looks like. You're living in a hospital bed, you're on bed rest, you have a nurse next to you at all times because you're fighting this illness. And at this stage, you're not Mary Sunshine, you try to be functional, but there are times I remember being pinned down by hospital staff, absolutely crying, of trying to run, to exercise, to get rid of any calorie I could at any stage. I remember going from doctor's appointments, jumping out of moving cars just to be able to get a bit of exercise in to feel okay for this moment. I cannot even stress, I guess, the depth of what eating disorders are. We see this societal view that, yes, it's maybe I want to look skinny, maybe I want to look pretty, where it runs so much deeper than that. So I guess in time, that's probably something I will write about. I like to express, I guess, the deeper side of what hospital life was actually like, but it is no fun. It's no walk in the park. It is a serious life-threatening illness that I'm really lucky I'm here to tell my own story. And I will tell you that in 2011, when I did have this encounter, I'd just come home from Dubai. I'd got myself into a state, and this was the moment where I was meant to pass. And it was one of those moments. I don't remember much of this time. I don't like to talk about actual numbers or actual weight because I find that is triggering for people. And I want to keep obviously everybody watching in regards that we're not defined by our numbers. So I don't think it's important to mention the actual weight that I was at. However, it was at a point where I was in a wheelchair. I was needing people to assist me to shower, wasn't able to stand up or down because my blood pressure would change that much. And this was soon before I was meant to pass. Long story short, what I'd like to say and what I go back from the beginning is having an eating disorder is the greatest thing that has ever happened to me in regards of it showed me the determined person that I was. It showed me that I stick to something. If I commit, I'm all there. So that changing point for me was after this time of everybody thinking that I was going to pass. And I'm stubborn. So I'm very, very stubborn. If someone tells me that I'm going to do something and I don't agree with it, I'll go and show you that you are wrong and I will take it to the other direction. So people telling me that I was going to pass actually must have stalled something in me to go, no, not today, Satan. This is not my time. And strangely, after that day, I was meant to, I guess, move on. Things started happening. So my bloods got better. My blood pressure started to raise. And for some reason, something came into my head and I said, I'm going to eat. But the thing is, I had no idea how to eat. So imagine just not doing something. I guess eating comes naturally to people because it's something that they are trained in. Basically, it's like practice. If you do it every day, you just realize that eating becomes normal to you. But imagine not doing that for 15 years. So foreign. So this is why eating disorder recovery, it's a hard journey. And I won't lie, recovery was the hardest thing that I ever did. But the good thing is, it's not going to be as long as the eating disorder, and it's only for a couple of years. So those who are in recovery and going through it right now, keep at it. Not fun, but there's going to be magic on the other side.